Welcome to the VIP Exchange, Champions in the Chaos, with Steven Iwersen, a program for people who want to turn the chaos of business and life into positive outcomes and forward momentum.
Well, welcome everyone to VIP Exchange, Champions in the Chaos, and I am thrilled to introduce to you one of my champions, Ed Rigsbee. Hello, Ed.
Hello, Stephen. How you doing? I'm happy to
Doing
be
well.
here.
Yeah, thank you. Well, ladies and gentlemen, Ed is an executive for an association. He and I have been friends for a number of years, but his expertise is really in helping leaders who are in associations really figure out how to better lead and provide better experience and benefits for their members. And so that's why I've invited him to join us, because associations have taken a big hit pre-COVID and since COVID, and so we just thought we'd kind of dig into that a little bit. So Ed, let's start there. Actually, let's start with, how did you choose to get into the association focus for your business?
That's interesting. It was just kind of a natural thing. Back when I got into the speaking business, we're talking late 80s, I used articles that I'd written as a way to connect with editors, to build relationships, make my relationship bank deposits, then try to leverage that to decision makers. Well, it just seemed to work that associations was the place to play, because they had publications, they had editors, they had meetings. If they didn't do meetings, they would go out of business. So just all the pieces fell into place, and associations seemed to be the place to play. And speaking of associations, in many regards, was kind of like a paid showcase, because, one speaks in an association meeting, one gets paid, and then generally who's in the audience? Business leaders, whether they're from large companies, small companies, and a number of those companies can also use my services. So that's the reason that most of my career, the focus has been associations.
Okay. Now, one of the things that I know that you've really zeroed in on in regards to your service to the association leaders, and as a leader of association yourself, was the importance of providing better benefit and strength to the members. And pre-COVID, you were kind of waving the red flag saying, hey folks, we've got some serious issues to address. What were the blind spots that those association leaders were not paying attention to?
Well, pre-COVID was a good time. When times are good, associations are riding high. They think that they're doing everything right. Members are there, not necessarily because the associations earned them. They're just there because these members had extra money, wanted to be, participate in their industry. And that's kind of it's the I hate to say it, but it's the opiate. They're lured by the opiate of just, we got lots of members, we're doing great, aren't we? And they didn't listen to the undertow grumblings of members complaining about, you should listen to us a little bit more, you should do this, you should do that, create a little bit more value. So it's anytime the economy is good, as it was before COVID, associations actually, and it's unfortunate, but they don't put a lot of focus on membership. They wait till they're hemorrhaging. Well, now that we're hemorrhaging, let's put a focus on membership.
Yeah. So was the focus more about events?
Yes.
Okay.
Pre-COVID, association CEOs got a lot on their plate, and they tend to have people in the different silos, in the membership silo, in the finance silo, in the meeting silo, in the education silo, and those people usually have a director title, and they kind of rely on those people to go make things happen. And the CEOs kind of sprinkle around and look around and sprinkle a few ideas and really play as the overseer. That's okay if everything's going great. But when things aren't going great, a little bit of a challenge because the association exec doesn't have their hand on the pulse the way they should. And, that proved out or played out with a lot of trade associations and professional societies in about, it started happening about the middle of 2020, because all of a sudden, a lot of memberships that were coming due, people weren't renewing. And all of a sudden, oh my gosh, also, a lot of association execs were, around March, April 2020, there's a reality to them that their key non-dues revenue event, non-dues revenue generation event, there's a problem. And the problem was, we might have to do it virtual. We might not be able to do it, and I got to say, some association execs, they really rallied to the challenge. And, the ones that just made the decision, okay, our meeting's going to be virtual. And they went out and promoted. And some of those associations where they maybe would have 400 or 500 people attending their annual meeting live, they were giving 1,100, 1,200 attending virtually, because all of a sudden people, especially the ones that are international, people from around the world could attend. So those folks that made the quick switch really put a lot of energy into the marketing machine. They came out okay. They charged less for their meetings, but they got a lot more people at their meetings. Okay. Then on the flip side, you got some people that go, oh no, our people just want to meet live. If they can't meet live, they're not going to meet. And they just threw in the towel, and they either didn't have a meeting or had a very lame virtual meeting. So, those were the two extremes, and there was all kinds of people in the middle.
Okay. I say to my clients and in some of the programs I speak at that adaptability has become more important than ability. Doesn't mean that ability isn't important, but sometimes those who have the ability but they choose not to adapt get left behind, and that sounds like what's happened for a number of associations.
Yeah, it really has. And the interesting thing, fast forward to where we are right now, something that COVID caused me to do, we all have to adapt. And when COVID hit, it's all of a sudden, okay, I don't know how long it's going to be till it's easy to fly. I don't know how long it's going to be till we get back to live meetings. And, so I had been doing a fair amount of, before that, Zoom and doing various webinars and this and that and the other. And when COVID hit, I really leaned into that. And one of the things that I did was I invited association CEOs. Let's get together on a weekly Zoom and let's talk. And that was very, very helpful, but massively time consuming. And, I did that for, May, June, July, free. And I don't know, we'd have 40, 50 people on a call. Then in August 2020, I said, okay, guys, I can't do this for anymore. Everybody's got to pay a couple bucks. And massive drop off, but kept about 20 CEOs, 20 plus, that said, yeah, and I laid it out there that they could pay whatever they could. It's like, pay what you can. And so the fascinating thing watching almost the last couple of years is I'm on a call every Tuesday with association CEOs, and like last week, the call was all about cybersecurity. And we had a cybersecurity expert person that you might know, Bryce Austin. And this week tomorrow, we're going to be talking all about it. So, there, bringing in various experts, seeing what they're interested in. When we brought Ford Sakes in on the marketing side, man, they were just very, very interested. So the association CEOs they're stressed out right now. They're strained. A couple of weeks ago when we were talking about the law of aloha, the spirit that Hawaii does, and a couple of them were saying, I would just like somebody else to make decisions for a couple of weeks, and they're a lot of them are at their wits' end because, okay, a lot of members either didn't rejoin because they didn't think the value was there, or members didn't rejoin because their businesses were so impacted that they had to go focus, or members didn't rejoin because their company says, no, we got to tighten the belt. We're not going to pay for your membership in ABC association. And then the association is getting strained out trying to figure out, okay, how, a lot of associations and societies, about half their revenue comes from non-dues revenue, where 30 years, 40 years ago, it was mostly from membership dues. So all of a sudden, when they're faced with, we got a big non-dues revenue drop, how are we going to run this association? So, I mean, their challenges over the last couple of years have been amplified, and it's been, I don't know if I should use the word fascinating, but it has been fascinating watching them over the last couple of years. And these folks bare their souls and talk about what's going on and challenges with their board and board members that just don't get it. One of the biggest problems association executives talk about, board members that are successful in their business, and they try to overlay that on running a nonprofit, and it doesn't work. It's two different animals.
That's right.
Or the dynamic of, you get 20 really bright people on a board, and collectively they become a bunch of idiots. And so these dynamics are going on that the association CEOs, you can see that there's so much coming at them that, generally you got one of these areas that maybe have to put a lot of focus, but right now, fortunately, unfortunately, they've got so much focus on all these other areas of running the organizations that the one thing that I am noticing from the calls with the association execs that I'm doing, membership has just kind of become the stepchild, not because they want it to be. It's just because there's so many other crises putting out fires that in their opinion, right or wrong, seem to take precedent. And the associations, wow, they've got to stop and take stock. If you're a association CEO right now and you're listening to this, I would say you got to stop, take stock. Yes, I know it's a crisis getting your meetings. I know it's a crisis dealing with your board. I know it's a crisis making the finances work. I know it's a crisis trying to decide, are you going to come back to the office or not? I know it's a crisis deciding, should we sell our building? Should we let our lease go? I know all those things you're dealing with. I get it. I know. And you cannot ignore your members. You cannot rely on your membership department to do everything, because it's got to emanate from the top. And if you as a CEO at an association society aren't focusing on your members, we've all got a problem. We've all got a problem.
That's right. It's amazing to me how many times a leader tries to abdicate the responsibility of communication to someone else when they're in crisis, and forget that what people are really looking for is for the leader to be upfront and communicating frequently as to where we're at, what's happening, where we're going to go next. And I think sometimes they do that because they fail to do what you just recommended, and that is take stock, but also, in a sense, triage. Take a look at all that stuff and really get focused on what is it that really has to have our attention, and who's getting left out, who's going to get missed here, and who are we going to lose. And usually who you lose are the ones who are the potential leaders, or they are the leaders, and they just get tired of the fact that there is no sense of direction or purpose, and they move on. And what you end up left with is the people who like to start the fires.
Yeah. Stephen, is interesting. Last night, my wife and I were just, put on Netflix looking for something of interest. and The Darkest Hour popped. And I'm familiar with the movie, but I'd never seen it. Gary Oldman as Winston Churchill. And I really didn't know what the movie was about or what aspects of Churchill's life. And it was called The Darkest Hour. And it was really about that very beginning when he was, when England, Neville Chamberlain had not prepared them for what was coming. And there was a certain facet of the British government that wanted to appease the German invasion and was looking for peaceful ways. And, Churchill was a hawk. I think that we all have to admit that. And he just goes, the only thing we can do is fight. But he's still in his government. People are trying to appease. And, he was going through the way it was portrayed, just going through a very difficult time trying to make a decision. Okay, what are we going to do? Our nation is at stake here. Mm-hmm. And it showed he just went out to the people and talked to the people and go, what do you guys think? Mm-hmm. The people, what do you think? And, they told him, no, we're not going to give up. We're not going to surrender. We're going to fight. Even if it's with broomsticks in the streets, we're going to fight. And it gave him the ability to communicate to the country, I've heard you. Here's what we're going to do. And I think that probably isn't a bad movie for all association executives to go watch tonight or tomorrow night and kind of get it a little bit in perspective here that, Churchill had to deal with the survival of a country. When you put that in perspective, dealing with the survival of an association isn't quite as critical. And to put things in perspective and go back and go, the people are your members. What do your members want? What do your members need? What is going to be a success from the members' perspective? We see associations and I don't want to get into bad mouthing any associations, but you and I belong to an association that doesn't do a real good job of listening to its members and going out to its members and understanding what its members want. It just kind of does what it does. And I think that that's a problem. And we're watching right now in this particular association, a recession of members, at the rate of this organization's at about 65% of what it once was. And so I think it's important for an association CEO to go, okay, what do your members want? Mm-hmm. What not what your board is screaming at you, because here's the problem. Your board of directors, more and more boards are getting more and more diverse, they tend to be less age diverse. And there's a lot of older people because now they've got, they're successful in the business, they've got time. The challenge is these older people, they're in a place in their career where they want to transition from being simply successful to being significant. And their experience on the board is we need to do advocacy and we need to do legislative and people need to join because they need to support the association. And their mindset is not the mindset they had when they joined. The mindset is, I want to transition from being simply successful to significant. And I think everybody else does too. But these more senior board members forget when they joined the organization, they were younger and they were more focused on just wanting to have a business that could succeed, that could prosper. And I think that one of the hard things for association CEOs to do is to get these more senior people, figuratively, I'm not going to say literally, but figuratively rattle them and go, wait a minute. Let's go back to when you joined ABC Association. Why did you join? Did you join for the betterment of the industry? Probably not. And understand that newer people and younger people, they're joining because of the fact that they want their business, their career, whatever, to succeed. And we've got to make sure that we don't lose our focus on why people join and to be very, very careful not to let the more senior people whose focus has morphed to lead the charge. Because, I got to tell you, I was one of the dental societies a couple years ago. I was at the board meeting of one of the state dental societies, and they'd given me a DVD on the video they put together to recruit members, and I watched it, and I asked the board member sitting there, I said, I've watched your video. It's done very nicely, very professional. Let me ask you a question. Who are you trying to influence with this video? And they said, well, people to join. And it's like, okay, that's not getting me anywhere. And I said, okay, well, where is the place that you have the greatest propensity to get the more people to join? Well, the dentists right out of dental school. Okay, so they're probably a little bit younger. Most of the people said, yeah. And I go, and this was before everything was heavily on YouTube. But so I held up the DVD and I said, you produced a beautiful video by baby boomers, for baby boomers, that talks about how the state dental society will help them to be significant. New docs don't care about that. New docs just want to figure out how to run a business and how to succeed.
Yep.
They couldn't understand that they completely missed the mark with their quote recruiting video. And that is so typical. I see this dynamic play out time and time and time
That's right.
time again. It just it drives me bonkers.
Years ago, I was leading a group of people in California who were going through a similar time that you just described. They had founders on the board. They had people who had been there from almost day one, and they were complaining that the younger generation wasn't present anymore. There were very few, and they weren't very active, and they just couldn't figure out why this younger generation didn't appreciate all the hard work that they had done to build this organization for them, and what was it going to take for this younger group to step up. And I don't know why, but I asked the question, what was it like when you first got started? If I remember the story right, you got started in somebody's garage. And one of the founding members just lit up and got all excited and started telling these stories about how they got through all this stuff and what they created. And the whole room, the energy just changed from complaining to, oh, these were good old days. And finally, I just interrupted them and I said, could it be that the next generation, the generation that you're wanting to take over, is just waiting for permission from you to have the same kind of adventure and experience that you did? But they don't know how to do that because you're trying to hand it all to them without permission to maybe make some changes or to do it differently. And the room got really quiet. And it took a couple of weeks for them to just kind of process that, for them to kind of accept the fact that was the problem. And when they started to go back and listen to that younger generation and literally gave them permission to start doing some things, to try stuff, that was the turning point. But it took a long time to get there. And I think that's where associations are today, is that are you really listening to that next generation that's going to be the leadership core? But more so, are you giving them permission to kind of take the charge and step back and be their cheerleader?
Yeah, absolutely. It's, you've got this dynamic that that not enough people understand what makes sense to keep, what makes sense to jettison. When I do programs for association people, one of the questions I hear a lot is, how do you sunset programs that are no longer viable, no longer relevant? And I would joke with a lot of them, because most of the younger people, as example, would say the golf tournament is worthless. We don't care about it. Most of the older people would go, oh my God, that's sacrilegious. You can't touch the golf tournament. Mm-hmm. And I'm just pulling that one because that is one that's so divisive that is so age driven in my experiences. And I think that every organization has to go back and ask themselves, okay, what's important that we keep that's part of our heritage that helps us, plug back into our beginnings and our roots. And I think that's very, very important. I think that if we don't keep that, then we're destined to make some of the same mistakes that we made before. At the same time, as you stated, that, there's also needs to be room for new programs. A lot of associations, when they formed, there wasn't that thing called, what's that? The internet. And things have evolved. A lot of trade associations were formed before World War II. And so, it's looking at, there's the need to hold on to what's valuable from the past, and that's not always easy to understand, and embrace what's relevant for the future. And yeah, I think a lot of people talk about it, and I think a lot of association boards of directors have a very, very difficult time. While they maybe intellectually know it's true, emotionally, they have such a hard time letting go. And that becomes the job of the CEO, executive director, president, whatever the chief staff executive's title is to help this board transition and sift through, what do we keep, what do we jettison, what do we look to add? And that's always the $64,000 question.
Yeah, that's right. And the fact that you said $64,000 question puts you and I in a category that very few would actually remember.
Yeah, I mean, isn't it interesting how our we have things that we use that point to something that like if I were to ask you, how do you spell relief? How do you?
I see the commercial going through my mind again.
There you go. And that commercial hasn't been on the air in 40 years.
Yeah.
And so it's just there's things that and my sons. I mean, I've got both my sons are in their 30s. Fully planted in millennialhood, and they remind me, yeah, Dad, that example doesn't make sense to us. I mean, I remember years ago, for several years in my speaking, I'd used an example from the movie Chariots of Fire. And then after the movie had been out for 10 years, I realized I got to stop using this example. Same thing, Pretty Woman. Example from that in my sales programs. I used to show it, and 10 years later, it's like,
yeah,
this doesn't really resonate with people. And so,
I know.
so and you and I have the same challenge that a lot of the association board people, accepting that some of my ideas, examples are old, and being willing to let go of some of those. But then the younger people accepting that there is a certain wisdom in age, and not that we're inflexible, but we've been there, done that 10 times, and we can pretty much tell you, you can try it if you want, but let me explain to you what's going to happen. And when I do that with my kids, they'll come back and they go, how do you know this? And I just would say, hey, I'm not the smartest guy around. I'm not the sharpest tack on the board, but I've got chronological knowledge, chronological credibility. Been there, done it enough times, had enough bloody knees, enough bloody noses that I can pretty much explain to you what's going to happen. And they come back like, how do you know this? And so I think that there's the need to respect the younger people with younger ideas, new ways, and but also respect the heritage. But if the older people aren't willing to let go a little bit, we're not going anywhere. If we're not willing to, as watching the movie last night, Darkest Hour, Winston Churchill, go get in the tube and sit with a bunch of people and talk to them and ask them how they feel. Well, if all I've got is a bunch of advisors, in Parliament that they're detached, I mean, so I think that the association CEOs need to be, as I said earlier, need to be doing a lot more talking with a lot more, we'll call them rank and file members.
Yeah.
That's and a little bit less talking with the board members,
Right. Right.
because we all know collectively a bunch of smart people getting together for whatever reason aren't so smart.
That's right. I think that the future for associations is coming to terms with the fact that it's not about creating new programs or reviving old programs, but it's focusing in on relationships. It's about community. And when you're talking about respect of the legacy, respect of the younger generation, new ideas, all of that's there. But the associations I've seen who have tried to rush out to create, here's some new programs or here's some new content, all that's important. But when you really listen to the members and you get past all those different layers, what they tell you is most important to them is the relationships and the things that they've learned from each other along the way. And that stands out as really kind of the cornerstone of every association I've talked to.
I would agree with you. Absolutely. I had the new volunteer leader of this association that we talked about earlier that we're both a member of, and contact me and say, hey, what's the value this association offers? And I said, well, number one, it's community. You're out there saying that the members value education a little bit, but not so much. They can get that education anywhere. They can't get that community anywhere. One of my clients that was a Western regional in the contracting industries, they're trying to figure out how to engage their members. And I said, let's create a hot map on zip codes. All of your members on the Western United States, let's look at where they are. Wherever we see a coagulation, this is where we need to build a virtual community. Now, when I say virtual community, this was before COVID, and I said, the virtual community can be as simple as having people get together. It doesn't have to be a chapter. Having people get together. The headquarter office, acquire somebody in the industry to speak at the meeting and create situations where people can come together to break bread. Now, I can get into a lot more detail on some of the structure of it, on how we did it and things to do and not to do to make it successful. But put that off to the side for right now. Just the basic idea was that really helped them. And I think that you're absolutely on target, that community is so important. I mean, a lot of associations, they're competing with members who have over time built businesses that do what the association does on education. However, it's pretty hard for anybody to compete with that national, regional, or state association on community. So I'm with you 100% on that one.
That's true. Well, this has been a great conversation. I hate to bring it to an end, but before we do, if one of our viewers or listeners is thinking, I'd like to get in touch with Ed, and I'd like to know more about this association huddle that he's doing weekly, is that open, and how do they get a hold of you?
Yeah, actually, we call it Chief Staff Executive Office Hours. It's only open to CEOs or executive directors, the top person. I've conveniently hidden it on my website. Yeah, because I don't want a bunch of looky-loos finding it, And
okay.
Although I will tell you that anybody that goes to rigsbee.com, RIGSBEE, goes into the search and puts in CSE for Chief Staff Executive, CSE Office Hours, will find the page where they can sign up. Okay. And also at that website for association people, just to make mention, there are 3 ethics workshops, because anybody that has their CAE, Certified Association Executive credential, need 1 hour to renew. There are also other free workshops at the website. along with you can find the raw and unedited show for association executives, which Stephen, you've been on, where we talked about the porcupine principle of leadership. So there's at my website. Don't get me wrong. I'm happy for people to pay me to help them, but there's an awful lot on my website that association executives can access for free. But if you want to be part of the Chief Staff Executive Office Hours and you're an association CEO or executive director, either send me an email or go noodle around and you'll find the page.
Very good. Very good. Well, one last question for you as we wrap it all up. Sure. That CEO, that association board member, somebody who's in a leadership role who's been listening today, and they're in that place where you described, where they're just wanting to say, I wish somebody else would make the decisions. They're kind of at a point of despair. What is your encouragement to them as they look ahead for the rest of the year and are hoping to turn things around?
Well, I mean, so many of us heard from either our mother, our father, our grandmother, our grandfather, this too shall pass. And I realize it's very simple to say this too shall pass, because when you're in the middle of the belly of the beast, you're not sure exactly how you're going to get out of it. But I think that the light at the end of the tunnel is association members are slowly coming back. Meetings are slowly coming back. People are trying desperately to find ways to have live meetings. And while it's a cluster, you know what, right now, believe me that within 12 months, we're going to be in a better place than we were. Even if another strain of COVID shows up, we're far enough through this that, we have, I wouldn't call it a new normal, but we've got an understanding of what's going on in the world, how to deal with things, and people are less afraid. People are more informed. Every day we're becoming more informed. And the more informed you are, the less afraid you are. And so I think that that's a good thing. And I would say to every association CEO, I know you're going crazy right now. You want to crawl under a rock. You know something, take a breath, have a glass of wine, or whatever your favorite, thing is to do to relax you. And just remember, take stock of priorities, and don't forget, the association, it's about the members. And if you can put a reasonable focus on the members will help you make everything else work.
Excellent counsel. Very good. Well, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us again for VIP Exchange, Champions in the Chaos. I know some of you are not association members. You should be. You should find a trade association, a group that shares some of the same values and experiences that you do. You're probably maybe not an association board member, or a leader, maybe not even a CEO, but I know that our conversation today has outlined some things that you could be doing in your own career or in your business. Because if you're a leader of a business, those team members, they're basically association members. Your peers, they're part of the team. And I hope that you'll take the advice and the counsel that our friend Ed Rigsbee has given us. And we hope that we'll see you next time.
Thank
you, Ed.